Hey Eagles, I'm back again. Yesterday we talked about pre-writing, and the steps to pre-writing are topics, audience, purpose, plan. You're going to want to say those to yourself a few times because we're going to have a test over that next week sometime. And remember, topics are just the ideas that you come up with before you start writing. And today I want to talk to you about audience because audience is super important for you to think about before you start writing because audience impacts the words that you choose to use in your story. And you probably already know this, even if you haven't actually sat down to really think about it. But I bet you already know that if you were writing a story for, let's say, the Queen of England, you would use different words than you would use if you were writing a story just for your friend. And you already know that you talk to your friends differently than you would the Queen of England. So we need to think about the people that we're writing before we get started. So we're going to use a little scale today. So at the top of the scale, we have informal, which just means not fancy. And at the bottom of the scale, we have formal, which just means fancy. So if you were going to a formal activity, you would wear your very fanciest clothes. You would wear a suit and a tie or a fancy, like really fancy sparkly dress. But if you were going to an informal event, you would wear just whatever clothes. You might wear your sweatpants, your shorts, an old t-shirt. That's informal. And we use our language in a similar way. We use either really formal language with people that we want to show extra respect to, and we use informal language when we're around each other. And both sets of language are okay. They're all language, they're all a part of English. It's all okay to use any of the English words that we know. We just have to know that there's a place to use those and a place not to use those so we don't offend others. Okay, so for example, if I had to go see the Queen of England or I was writing a letter to her, then I would use my fanciest language, right? Let's see if I can get this to move. My very fanciest language. I would put her down here on the fancy, right? Down here at the bottom, because I'm not sure why that didn't move with that. We would want her to be down here at the fanciest. Okay, we would use our politest words. Why, hello, how are you today? We wouldn't say words around the Queen of England. We wouldn't use words like fart, right? We wouldn't say that around the Queen of England because we're trying to be formal, right? We wouldn't use a word like ain't. I ain't gonna do that. We wouldn't say that in front of the Queen of England, probably, unless had gotten to be really good friends with her, and then we might. Okay. All right, the same thing with Mr. Dowdy. Think about where Mr. Dowdy would go on the scale. Would he go at the most formal, like the Queen of England? Probably not. He probably wouldn't be informal. We're not going to talk to him like our friend, are we? Well, we would put him maybe somewhere like this, right? Let me get his name to move. All right, how about Mr. Jones? Where would Mr. Jones go? I bet you already know where Mr. Jones would go, right? He's gonna go someplace around informal, right? He's definitely not going to be as fancy as Mr. Dowdy. He's not going to be as fancy as Queen of England, but we're still maybe not going to use just any word we know around Mr. Jones, right? Where's Miss Shonfog go? Is she as formal as Mr. Dowdy? Maybe not. Is she as informal as Mr. Jones? Probably not. Probably somewhere in the middle. Okay. So that also, it doesn't just impact how we speak, but also how we write. So it's important to know what kinds of things are okay to write. So Mr. Jones' class, he might be totally okay if you write a horrifyingly scary story. I don't really want to read anything that scary. I don't want to have lots of blood and gore in it because that really bothers me and I can't sleep at night. So it's important that you know who you're writing for. Okay. And that's for the rest of your life. When you're in college, you got to know what kind of language your college professors want you to have. When you have a job, you might need to know what kind of words or language is appropriate at work and not at home. So we always want to think about our audience before we write. All right, I want you to see the discussion board for your next step. Good to talk to you guys today. See you later.